That's right. You're listening to another episode of the Co-Main Event Mixed Martial Arts Podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Folks. We're both longtime MMA journalists, and for nearly the last 14 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. Ben, the UFC is going over to Perth this weekend, going to the Rack Arena, granddaddy of them all, to put on a welterweight bout between Jack Della Maddalena and Carlos Prates. Jack Della Maddalena in perhaps the most unenviable position that a fighter can be in here against Carlos Prates, having won the title in a fashion where he beat a guy that we already didn't necessarily trust as champion, then became a guy that we didn't necessarily trust as champion, then got his ass whipped in his first title defense, and now heads into this contender fight with Carlos Prates. I don't know, trying to tread water, trying to keep himself from totally falling off, trying to keep himself, I guess, up near the top of the welterweight division in that elite class. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Aljamain Sterling refused to go softly into that good night last weekend, going out there and getting yet another win in a fight that the old guy was obviously supposed to lose in the UFC. Old dogs being a little stubborn these days in the UFC. We got some listener mail. We got lots of stuff to talk about. First, though, Ben, Pledge Month is nearly upon us.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Just a few more days. May marks the Co-Main Event Podcast 14th anniversary, our 14th birthday. We've been doing this so damn long. We've been through marriages, children, life changes, numerous houses, several presidential administrations, each worse than the last. We've been here, man. We've been out here.
It's crazy to think that this little podcast is now old enough to refuse to wear a jacket to school even on the coldest of days.
Yeah.
It's old enough to be absolutely glued to its newly acquired phone, old enough to know about memes that you couldn't fucking comprehend. This podcast, Chad, is kind of an elder middle schooler at this point, which explains why it can be both truculent, obstinate, and yet, at times, surprisingly whimsical. I think that's all explained by the fact that this podcast is turning 14. But as people, by this point, should goddamn well good know, we can't do it alone. We're just two guys. We don't have the backing of a major website or some big corporation, Chad. We're just two lonely guys standing against the tidal wave of modern media. We need the help. We need the help of the co-maniacs out there.
That's true. And May traditionally is the month that we go hat in hand, knocking on doors, if you will, virtually knocking on doors across the world, their hands out, asking that could the people help us out with some spare change, with what they can share. And so that's coming up in May. Seriously, though, we've got some fun stuff planned for May. We've got some big announcements coming up for stuff that will be on the line, up for grabs during Pledge Month. Some fun stuff that could happen here on the proper, some fun stuff that could happen over on the Patreon. I believe we'll be making that announcement this week, if I'm not mistaken, right? Because Thursday is the first. Pledge Month is upon us on Thursday.
Yeah, a lot of people, I'm going to say actually a troubling number of people and with a concerning level of enthusiasm jumped at our idea of bad takes accountability. They just could not wait to tell us about all our many bad takes over the years. Takes, frankly, that we thought were lost to time. We thought we'd never see these takes again.
Yeah.
And they have been resurrected. People using the opportunity for Bad Takes Accountability Week to throw them back, make us own up to these takes. I'm both dreading it and looking forward to it at the same time.
Yeah. Was reminded this past week by a loyal listener of all the times that we thought the MMA fighter might have a chance in a boxing match.
Oh no.
We were
Oh
just
no.
desperately trying to talk ourselves into the fact that the MMA fighter might have a chance in the boxing match, and just never worked out for us, man.
We just felt like, okay, they're due. MMA fighters are due in the
Yeah.
boxing space. Sooner or later, the law of averages says they're going to win one.
Yeah. So stay tuned for Pledge Month. That's coming up in a few days. You know what? I guarantee you'll find out about it. We're going to figure out a way to make sure that you hear about it. So stay tuned. But even if you don't, we'll be beating you over the head with our various messagings. So, that's coming up. Be advised.
Various messagings, indeed.
Various messagings, our channels, our various channels, communicative channels they'll be humming. They'll be on fire come Pledge Month. You want to talk about Jack Della Maddalena a little bit here and Carlos Prates, the main event, welterweight main event down there in Perth, UFC Fight Night 275 of these, which would sound like a lot if we weren't sitting here doing episode 690 of the co-main event podcast. And that doesn't even count the other episodes we do over on the Patreon. It doesn't count the special episodes that we've done over the years. It doesn't count the goddamn series that we did where we watched all of Deadwood.
Yeah.
And talked about it. All that stuff, by the way, available on the Patreon. But like I said, Jack Della, not too long ago, Ben, not too long ago, Jack Della Maddalena was the toast of the town. He hadn't lost in forever. He's 18-2. Had just defeated Bilal Muhammad to become the welterweight champ. But like I said at the top of the show, we weren't totally buying it. And we thought that his matchup with Islam Makhachev at UFC 322 was really going to tell the tale. And unfortunately, it did. And now Jack Della Maddalena is out here trying to pick up the pieces against Carlos Prates this weekend.
When you say not too long ago, exactly a year ago, we were sitting here getting ready to see JDM go into a fight with Bilal Muhammad. That fight was May 10th, 2025, right? We were thinking, all right, we kind of chose JDM here because he was available. We wanted to have a welterweight title fight on this date in Montreal. So we went ahead, we went with JDM. He's going to go in there, fight Bilal. I don't know if we all necessarily expected he was going to win that fight, but it tells you how things can go in this sport where you're sitting there. If somebody would have told you he'll become the champ, turn around and lose the champ, and by this time next year, we'll be really fighting for his spot in the welterweight division. Because you're right, this is a really tough kind of a fight. This is the kind of matchmaking where I do think the UFC deserves credit for putting together good fights, but also just tough ass fights. Because if in boxing, if you had a champ, he had just lost the belt, his team would be looking to position him in a kind of get right sort of matchup. Let us get it back in the win column, man. We don't need to jump in there against one of these hitters right away. And the UFC, they kind of say, well, once you climb to that mountaintop, you got a name. We're paying you good money. We want you to main event an event in your part of the world. Damn it, you're going to have to fight somebody tough. And that's how you could very quickly, like, it's not at all unreasonable to think he could go from being the champion to being on a 2-fight skid and looking like a guy who is falling in the welterweight division. Because Carlos Prates is a tough guy. He gonna come in there smoking them Marlboro Reds, Chad. I don't know if they got him in Australia. I don't. They might have some completely different brands that I don't even know about. But he's gonna come in there smoking the Marlboros, looking to put it on you. I believe he comes into this one as a very slight favorite over JDM. I want to draw your attention for a moment here to the fight poster. If you go to Wikipedia, where you can see the fight poster for this event, and I know there has to be, even in this era of sort of painting by numbers fight promotion, we're not exactly doing, Pride FC revival with these fight posters. We're not getting the greatest artists that we can find to put together these fight posters. We're sort of painting by numbers. But there must have been a decision here where we were like, we could have them both facing the camera, as it were, and instead we turn the flattest, most dented ass face in the game sideways, just
Yeah.
so you can get the full picture of it. It's like a frying pan that's been beat to shit, just sideways like that.
That straight line that his name makes, that Jack Della Madalena's name makes running vertically from the bottom to the top of the poster, really emphasizes how flat, how frying pan flat Jack Della Madalena's face is.
Yeah.
It really does.
And you know what? I know that we hear often enough from the Australian fans who are like, we understand why you insist on putting guys from this neck of the woods on the fight card. We would like it to seem a little bit more like a regular UFC offering and not always just sort of like a regional fight night kind of thing. But you look up and down this one, especially coming out of the Apex, where you go, all right, we're going back on the road, going to a whole new hemisphere, live crowd, and you look at the lineup and you go, I've heard of most of these people.
Yeah.
That's nice. And of course, Chad, I know you're excited. We're going to get Tai Tuivasa back in there because talk about somebody who is due. Talk about somebody who is due like a motherfucker. Tai Tuivasa has lost 6 straight, Chad. 6 straight. Now we're going to go up in there against Louis Sutherland. I mean, you can't lose them all, can you? Just the way that people will say you can't win them all. That's what I'd be saying in Tai Tuivasa's corner. You can't lose them all. Sooner or later, you got to slip on a banana peel and win one.
I regret to report that Tai Tuivasa has only recently dropped out of the UFC heavyweight rankings.
Again?
Mm-hmm.
Because he came back in right when we got rid of Jailton Almeida. When they dumped Jailton Almeida, he got bumped back in.
Yeah, he of 6 consecutive losses assumed a spot in the UFC heavyweight rankings basically by default. Basically, I can only imagine because we didn't have any other guys we thought were good enough to put in the top 15, and so we went ahead with Tai Tuivasa. But he is no more a ranked heavyweight, and now he goes out there against Louis the Vanilla Gorilla Sutherland, a guy who we have already talked about has perhaps the most British name or Australian name. Oh, he's from Tottenham, England. So he has the most British name potentially of anyone on earth, Louis Sutherland.
Yeah, I mean, Louis Sutherland does sound like a guy I would make up trying to trick you. When I would do one of these fighters on this upcoming fight night is fictional. Louis Sutherland sounds like somebody I would like to think that I would come up with. But you throw him in there, and here's one where I forgot what this felt like to go and look at the betting odds for an upcoming UFC event and see Tai Tuivasa with a minus next to the number next to his name. We're looking at some places as high as a 2-1 favorite over Louis Sutherland. I remember talking years ago to, I think it was Dan Hardy. And this is back when the UFC days when 3 losses in a row usually meant you were almost automatically cut. Now they don't really do that quite so much anymore, especially with heavyweights. But if you have any sort of name, we're doing so many goddamn events. We need the bodies, and we just don't want to give up anybody that somebody else could use. And he was talking, though, about how the pressure that starts to come, like it really starts to fuck with your head when you're on a losing streak like that, because you go out there just thinking, I can't lose again. Instead of going out there when you were a freight train from hell thinking, I'm going to take this dude's head off. And those are very, very different mindsets. He's also talking about how MMA fans, when you're on a losing streak, when you really need to fucking win one, love to remind you of that fact. And they just sort of give you no respite from it. And he said he'd be out there posting something on social media where he's just like going to a movie with my girlfriend or something. And people would, like, all the replies would essentially be like, you need to be working on your wrestling. You need to be in there working on your double leg. Why don't you go down to the local high school, put on a singlet, work with those kids, see if you can get better at it. And him being like, do you think I'm not working on my wrestling? There's only so much time you can spend in the day. You need to take some time off, but it's just sort of constant. I know Tai Tuivasa has hung around by virtue of being a certain kind of fighter, a jolly figure who we like having around, but also you do have to win one at some point, and you know he must be feeling that.
Especially in a sport where mindset seems so important, right? Like if you don't have that confidence, that chip on your shoulder, that in some cases, absolute certainty that you are going to go out there and win, it almost makes it seem like a lost cause before you even climb in the cage. And that's got to be something that would hamper uh, the 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 sports psychology of a normal man.
Yeah.
Do you think it bothers Tai Tuivasa? Or do you think he's just like, I'm going to do a shoey. I'm going to go out there. I got these anvils for hands and I'm going to throw them as hard as I can at this other guy's face and let the chips fall where they may.
Well, first of all, on the shoey point, I will say one of the saddest things I've ever seen while covering a UFC event was when I went to that one in Melbourne where Izzy Adesanya beat Bobby Knuckles in the main event for the middleweight title. But on the undercard, Tai Tuivasa had been quite easily beaten. I can't remember who it was. He got taken down and submitted by somebody who was just sort of like, you know what? I'm not even fucking with that. Sergey Spivak, that's who it was. Just sort of went in there and was like, I'm not standing here letting this guy throw bombs at my head. Just going to take him down. Got to an arm triangle choke, finished him off. Crowd very muted afterwards. Tai Tuivasa exits the cage looking bummed, and there's a fan standing in the front row with his shoe off in one hand and a big plastic cup of beer in the other one, trying to offer it as Tai Tuivasa walks by. And Tai saw him. Like, they made eye contact, and it was just like, I can't, bro. I can't do the shoey after losing, after basically doing nothing and losing via arm triangle choke. It's not a shoey time. You need to have a celebratory feel for the shoey to actually. That's part of what makes it not seem quite as gross as it is, I'd imagine, is that you're high on the adrenaline. You can't do a shoey if you lose your 7th in a row. But I do think one of the tricky things about being a guy like Tai Tuivasa is you got to know fans love you for a specific kind of fighting style. And we knew even when you were winning fights with that style, that's not the kind of style a guy employs if he has to win them all. That's the kind of guy where, like, that's a guy just being like, fuck it, let's go. It's going to be exciting. Somebody going to end up on the floor. Don't much care who it is. And yet, when you get to a point where people are looking at you and being like, but you do need to win occasionally, how do you become a different kind of person? I would think you would first go harder in the other direction, where you would just say, fuck it all the way. I'm just going to plant my feet and throw. Like, it's got to be hard to even game plan for a fight when you know that's what's expected of you. That's kind of the key to your survival this long, was being that fuck it kind of guy. But also being the fuck it kind of guy increases the odds that you lose a 7th.
Well, there's no way Tai Tuivasa becomes a different person, right? Like the die is cast with this guy. He is who he is, and we all know who he is. And he's the guy who is going to go out there and throw solid metal anvils at Louis Sutherland's head. Do you think offering Tai Tuivasa a shoey after a loss, sort of like the Australian equivalent of when The Undertaker asked Brock Lesnar, do you want to do it? After he was coming out of the cage after losing to Cain Velasquez. It seems like a parallel there. Okay, I hear what you're saying. I got 2 questions for you. Question the first.
Okay.
Does Tai Tuivasa need to win one? Because, like, let's say he doesn't. If you're the UFC, do you turn him loose? Do you feel like there's no way or no place that Tai Tuivasa could land that could hurt you? Or do you just keep him around because he's fun? Second question, if you are Louis Sutherland and you're facing a guy who's lost 6 fights in a row, and you look up and you see the gambling odds and you're the underdog, how do you think that makes you feel exactly?
I think that's kind of easy. You tell yourself, these people don't know. They don't know who Louis Sutherland is. they're not ready for this heat. You're going to go out there and show them. I think in some ways, I was talking to Chael Sonnen about this not too long ago, actually, because when I was writing something else, and he was saying that in some ways it's easier to be the underdog as a fighter, to go into somebody else's territory, because that question of how are the fans going to react to you, how are people going to treat you, is already settled. They're against you. They think you're going to lose. They want you to lose. And so then some of the pressure is off in that sense. When you're the favorite, it's a disaster if you lose. It's an upset. You failed everybody. When you're the underdog, there's at least more of a sense like, well, I would be shocking people. I'd be surprising people if I go in there and win. And if I lose, that's just what people expected anyway. And so I think some people do a lot better in that underdog role. I do think Tai Tuivasa has got to be the kind of guy where if you're going in there and you're looking at, all right, what do I think I'm going to see here? Similar to you saying that the die is cast on Tai Tuivasa. Yeah, I mean, at this point, pretty easy guy to kind of game plan for, right?
Yeah.
You probably don't have to spend too many days of your training camp working on omoplata defense. I don't think you need to worry too much about like spinning heel kick shit. He gonna throw them bungalows. That's what he's gonna do to you. Then he's gonna get tired. That's the other thing you can count on.
Well, you got to make it till then.
Well, you've got to make it.
That's the whole trick.
2.5 minutes into the first round. Yeah, you do. That last one, man. That last one was one of those where, like we said, that we were going to start the rumor that the bettors fucked up and paid off both guys to lose. That's what that last one felt like. And no one wanted to win that fight.
Point of fact, lasting 2.5 minutes into the first round is something Louis Sutherland has yet to do in the UFC.
Okay.
Remember, you're listening to the Co-Main Event Podcast proper. This show drops every Tuesday afternoon for free in your timelines and podcast libraries. I'm not going to give you the whole spiel. It's right before Pledge Month. I'm just going to tell you, go check out the Patreon, man. See if you want to join. See if you're interested. We got hella content up over there. And if you don't want to do that, buy a shirt. Buy a mug for your dad. Daddest man on the planet mug. If you want to check out the Patreon, go to patreon.com/co-main event. If you want to see our various wares, our merchandises, go to co-mainevent.com and click the link at the top right-hand corner of the screen that says shop. As always, we partner with our guy, Johnny Ashcroft, on the shop. He is a designer from Portland, Oregon. We can't recommend him highly enough. You can hit him up at studiosuperconductor.com or on Instagram at Studio Superconductor. Is that right? I did this without any notes because we've been doing this for so long.
Feels right.
All right. Anyway, like we always do about this time, let's do a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
First piece of listener mail this week comes to us from Dan Alexander, who writes in to say, not afraid to speak his mind, even if he occasionally trips over his own tongue, skillful, brave, and creative, a former champion, and by all accounts, a stand-up teammate. Wasn't it great to see how now savvy veteran Aljamain Sterling get the win? Please discourse. Love you both unequally, but definitely proud of you both in only a way that a parent can.
Yeah, I mean, Aljamain Sterling, they keep trying to put him in these situations, man, where they think like, all right, what can we use you for? What kind of value can we squeeze out of you while you're still around? And he keeps winning those fights. It also seemed like the UFC just seems so like ambivalent toward him at times. And he said something after this fight about how Hunter Campbell called him for where his contract was coming up. Hunter Campbell called him. Again, I say astounding to me how often we hear these stories about UFC fighters just, oh, hey, it's essentially like if you were an NFL player, you're walking around, you're going about your day, and the GM calls you to talk things, maybe talk about your new contract. You might end up agreeing to a direction for your future by the end of that phone call when you see his name appear on there. They're just having those conversations. Not an agent, not a manager, not a representative, just them. One day Hunter Campbell calls you and you got to figure out what the hell we're doing. And he said Hunter Campbell said something to him about that they didn't get the sense that he wanted to be in the UFC anymore. And he was saying that he hoped to retire with the UFC. And it's interesting that the UFC is thinking about him in those terms, I think, where they were looking at him and maybe going like, he's a malcontent. He's getting on there in years. He's already had a title run. Let's see if we can put him in some of these fights, get somebody else a little shine off of his name, and then move on here. They got to win those fights, though. And we've talked about skill sets that age poorly. Aljamain Sterling seems to have one of those skill sets that ages pretty well.
Well, the only losses in recent memory are Sean O'Malley and Movsar Evloev. So that's not too shabby. It's also, we do have a tendency to think of Aljamain Sterling as like one of the old dogs, and he has been in the UFC for a solid 12 years at this point. But the guy's only 36. Like, that's not young for a fighter by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also, he doesn't have one foot in the grave, for God's sakes, right? I guess we talk about the decline of championship level fighters after they get to 35, but as you said, Aljamain Sterling's fighting style seems like something he could do for a long time. So, him coming back to featherweight, he did have that stumble against Movsar in 2024, but has rebounded with wins over Brian Ortega and now Youssef Zalal in a fight that was an impressive performance by him for sure. I don't know, man. Did we put this guy out to pasture like a little bit too early? Because another win or two, you're thinking he could be a legitimate contender in this weight class.
Do you think that the UFC would allow that? Do you think that they want to see a world where Aljamain Sterling is a legitimate contender? Do you think that they come out of a fight like this, see his performance, and go, well, shit, we might have to do Aljamain Sterling versus Alexander Volkanovski before we know it?
He's coming for that ass, Ben.
He knows what he's doing this time. Before, when he was coming for that ass, felt like maybe he hadn't completely thought it through. He hadn't said it out loud and heard how it was out. This time he knows.
Yeah.
He made a choice.
Next question comes to us from Zach Lemon on Patreon. It says, question for BJJ correspondent Ben Folks. Is it hard to lock in that back control body triangle that Aljo does? He manages to get to a position where he cannot get hit, and he can threaten submissions or tenderize his opponent's face for 5 minutes. I'm not saying it's thrilling, but it's so dominant, I'm surprised it's not used more.
It's one of those where it's easier for people. It depends on your body type. Like if you have long legs, then it's easier for you to get that body triangle right away and lock it in. And some people, that just is a naturally fitting part of their game. I was never much of a body triangle guy. I don't think my legs are long enough. But if you ever roll with somebody, sometimes, you'll roll with somebody who's just like long and lanky. They seem all arms and legs, and they'll lock in that body triangle on you. And it sucks, bro. It sucks. And the steps to remove it are fairly simple and straightforward. And in some ways, it's a little easier to deal with than just straight up, normal hooks, back control kind of stuff that you'll see people do, just because you sacrifice a little bit of mobility when you lock in that body triangle. And some guys get really good at, they'll lock in the body triangle. The triangle is on one side. You go to deal with that. And if you get it loose, they're really good at just transitioning and locking it up on the other side. And it's just sort of frustrating. But he's made a point of doing that, where we've seen those kind of fights where if he gets your back at all early in a round, you're kind of just there for the rest of the round. And it's not necessarily always the most fun thing, because he won't take a whole lot of chances. Like, you're not really opening somebody up that much if you're just like locking them in that triangle, but you're like tenderizing the side of their head with some punches. You're staying busy enough to keep the ref off your back, basically. And you're just not going anywhere. You're definitely not going to win a round if you're stuck there the entire time. But he's also not exactly taking a lot of risks to try and finish a fight there. But we've seen him. He done it to people before, where he gets you in those spots. And if you feel that body triangle lock on you when 4 minutes left on the round, that you're going to be there for the next 4 minutes. It's going to suck.
It has been said that perhaps the most important skill to have in a mixed martial arts fight is the ability to dictate where it occurs.
Yeah, that helps.
Next question this week comes to us from Cody Bernston on Patreon. Here, we're going to get into it here.
Okay.
Quote, "It was fucking awesome. I literally took every minute of it in. It was pretty crazy, a unique experience. That was Dana White over the weekend talking about the absolute clinic that Aljo put on against Youssef Zalal. LOL, nah, that was the quote we all saw from Dana talking about being in the area of an active shooter over the weekend at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Look, I don't blame Dana for skipping that card. I get it. But to be excited about being in the immediate vicinity of a shooting, I'd like to say I'm not surprised, but maybe a little bit? Is this how do we have to, is this posturing? Are we so, is part of being a manly alpha such a part of our personality that this is the only reaction that we can have to a public shooting event? Or do you think Dana White literally actually felt this way? Because you can see in the video,
Yeah,
he doesn't look scared or worried, or he does in fact merely look interested.
yeah, he looks excited. He looks pretty jazzed about the whole thing. It is a good reminder that Dana White can't even be bothered to go to some of these UFC events. Why did we need Dana White at the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
Front and center. So he's sitting at the table right up front. So T-Dog can look down there and see him. So he can see him, and Dana can give him the thumbs up. Doing great, buddy. You're doing great.
He's not in the administration, and he is definitely not a White House correspondent, so it seems odd that he would need to be there. For one thing, he definitely seemed like he was trying to sort of amp up his tough guy creds, because he made sure to mention, he was like, they were yelling at people to get down under the table, so I didn't get down. And it's like, okay, we're all very impressed. First of all, shooter didn't even get in the room, didn't even get on the same floor as all this stuff. And so it's like, if you're trying to make yourself out to be the tough guy there, you were really in no danger. Like that part, I feel, has been kind of lost in some of the discourse around this whole thing. But I thought it was interesting to hear from Matt Brown on this one over on MMA Fighting, because as you recall, he was there that night at the Pantera show when there was that famous shooting, and when Dimebag Darrell got murdered. And Matt Brown was in attendance as a longtime heavy metal fan. You know, shouldn't surprise us that Pantera comes to town, Matt Brown is going to be there. His quote about this, you know, since he's lived through one of those and lived through a real one where he really was in the room when there was a shooting event like that, he says, "I'm absolutely flabbergasted. It took me completely blindsided. When he came out, when I saw the short little clip of him saying that was awesome, I think I have a little bit more of a justification in criticizing that, being that I've been in a mass shooting before. I've been there when there was a shooting going on, which most people probably haven't. It is not awesome in any sense of the word. It is not fucking cool one bit. For him to say that, I did not appreciate that. Not that my opinion matters whether I appreciate it, but there's some people whose lives are at risk there. That really blows my mind that someone would say that shit like that was awesome. A dude got shot. Maybe you survived, but got shot. That's a traumatic experience for him. There's not a single fucking thing awesome about that. People don't need to be going around shooting people, and there's nothing cool about that. I don't know why anyone would say that was awesome. That's the weirdest, most oddball thing I've ever heard anybody say." To me, I heard that, I was just like, is this just more confirmation that Dana White, either through a quirk of personality that was always there, or from being just like a rich, powerful guy who gets to live in a bubble of his own making for most of his life, just no real empathy for other human beings in the normal sense of the word?
Yeah. I think it's probably a little of everything, but I concur with Matt Brown, and as a person who has not been involved in a public shooting event, I can say Matt Brown is uniquely qualified, right, to come out and make those statements. Next question this week comes to us from the artist formerly known as Matthew. You'll recall, I believe, last week, Matthew, first-time emailer to the show, sent us a very long email that I condensed, had to cut it down so we could read it. This week he's kept it a little bit more brief. He's opted for brevity. He says, "Thank you for shouting out my last email. I'm back with a much shorter message this time. Is it possible that MMA media is overestimating the impact Conor McGregor's return will have? I had a couple of friends over last weekend, and they aren't MMA fans, but they do have a casual interest in the sport, and were in their late teens when McGregor was peaking. So to me, they're a good barometer." Then he says, "Thanks as always for the podcast." Now, see, I think he meant to add in here probably that they weren't interested or impressed by the possibility of McGregor's return. And
we went so brevity-ish that we maybe left that part out.
Here's the thing. I feel like athletes in combat sports remain marketable way longer than I think they should. I learned this a while back. I've looked at certain guys over the years and I've thought, well, he's done. We've seen XYZ happen to this guy. Nobody's going to tune in to watch him fight again. And yet it seems like people do. It seems like people continue to tune in again and again, far past the point where at least I would think that someone's drawing power would be reduced. So is the UFC or MMA media overestimating the impact that a return from Conor McGregor would have? Maybe, I don't know. But at the same time, I've been surprised too many times to be surprised again. You know what I mean? Like if he comes out here in the same casual fan base that lined up to make him one of the UFC's biggest pay-per-view draws is still there for him, I wouldn't be surprised. I refuse to be surprised.
I think that what you say is particularly true when it is really a personality-driven fan base. When it wasn't just, hey, this guy's fights were awesome. Because that, I feel, we've seen that disappear more quickly, because once you physically can't produce those kind of awesome fights, if that was all it was, fans will move on from that kind of quickly. But when it is a whole cult of personality where they really bought in and you got them to believe you were a certain kind of person, they do hold on to it a lot longer than the results would indicate they should. And the best example of that is probably the Diaz brothers, both of them. We saw it happen with Nick. We've seen it happen to some extent with Nate. This is the whole thing that Daniel Cormier and Nate Diaz were beefing about, right? It was Daniel Cormier basically being like, you made a lot of money. You tricked people into thinking that you're good. The results, the record suggests you are not very good, that you're pretty mediocre, but still remain popular. Still, people will show up to watch Nate Diaz fight, even if he's not necessarily giving you great performances that seem like they should merit that. It's that he got people to believe like he is this guy, and that has a much more enduring quality than anything you can do physically. Conor McGregor's is a little bit different just because he hit such a high that we still never seen any other fighter hit. And then the fall was precipitous, Chad. It was a precipitous fall in several different ways, where it just got to a point, you cruise along, you're winning damn near everything, and then suddenly you lost 3 or 4. Your last win was in January 2020. Got your goddamn leg broke, got knocked out, got absolutely tooled up by Khabib, and at the same time keep getting accused of sexual assaults of a very, very similar nature, found liable for one of them back in your home country. All kinds of scandals that make it just feel dirtier and dirtier as a viewer to support you. So it's a complicated bag he's dragging behind him coming into any future UFC fight. But at the same time, doesn't it feel like as a fan base as a whole, we are just starved for something that feels big?
Yeah.
Something that feels like something that feels like stardom. And that he's close enough at this point, brings a little bit of nostalgia for a UFC high point that was years ago, that I can see people rallying and getting into it just because of that. I don't think it'll be as high ever again as it was, but I could see it being a real injection of energy for a lot of the fan base.
Yeah, I mean, you're not getting back to Mayweather versus McGregor. Like
No.
that was one of the highest watermarks in MMA adjacent news history, probably in combat sports history. That was off the charts in terms of attention and viewership. So you're not getting back there. And you know, we're on the record already saying Conor ain't coming back to be a consistent member of this roster, right? Conor McGregor, as much as he likes to talk about it, ain't coming back to fight 2-3 times a year. You know, you're maybe going to get one more bite of the apple out of this guy. God damn it, I did it again. I keep saying, one and done. This guy, he won't be viable after this. He probably has 10 more fights. Shit, I don't know.
I mean, at this point, I need to see that he can get through a training camp and show up in one piece.
You need to see him have one fight.
Yeah.
First.
I mean, he has put his body through some things in and out of the cage, especially in the nightclubs early of a morning, especially out there on the yacht. He has done some things that have, I'm sure, hurt his longevity as an athlete. And I need to be convinced that he can do a full training camp without his body shattering like glass and get in there and fight. I'll believe it when I see it. Yeah. But I also, 10 more fights? No, I think you're safe on this one.
Probably not.
I'll prepare myself for Bad Takes Accountability Week 2036, but this time I'm standing on it. I think that if you're the UFC, you better act like you're lucky to get one more. Don't make long-term plans for this guy. Don't work on a slow build for this guy. That's what I'm saying.
Never underestimate combat sports' ability to stand on the sponge until every last drop of water has come out of it. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Kimbo Slice had already been knocked out by replacement fighter Seth Petrozelli before the UFC even signed him and basically booked him as the special guest star of the all heavyweight, I believe, season 10 of The Ultimate Fighter. Like he was the superstar surprise entrant in that tournament. Didn't get tremendously far in it. Then came out and lost to Matt Mitrione, aka Matrione. And even after all of that, Ben, Bellator was still like, oh, we could probably squeeze some more water out of the sponge here. Let's go ahead and do it. So I'm telling you, some of these guys, man, they just go on and on.
Yeah. Unless they, do various things that might render them ineligible for competition.
Next question this week comes to us from Sean Rogers, who writes, subject, who should Ilia Topuria fight after Justin Gaethje? Bad news, guys. I'd rather see Topuria fight Sarukian than Makhachev. Of note, I had to look up how to spell every single name above. At least he's honest about it. We're not even going to let Justin Gaethje have the fight first. We should just, I know what we're all thinking.
Yeah.
I know what is most likely to happen. Let's just let the guy have his fight. Let's just let him go out there and give it the old college try. You know?
I mean, the best way to improve his chances in that fight is for us to all act like we're already thinking about what is Islam Makhachev going to do next. I mean, what is Ilia Topuria going to do next? Like that, we've done this before. That would be, if I'm Justin Gaethje, I want the entire MMA world to be doing that because you'll make the gods laugh. You will feel the ground shake as the gods up on Mount Zion's laugh and have Ilia Topuria walk straight into a right hand.
Isn't it amazing what Arman Sarukian has been able to do?
It really is.
Because
all on his own, essentially.
Yeah. And not too long ago, we were joking about it. We were sitting up here saying, you get why it can't be you, right, troll boy?
Yep.
In terms of Arman Sarukian not getting the title shot that he probably deserves, that he has let slip through his fingers before. And here, this guy goes out there and, like you said, all on his own, has made himself into a thing. Albeit, an absolute wild card of a thing, not necessarily stoking confidence that he could make it to the cage for his title shot. But I am more interested in Arman Tsarukyan now than I ever thought I would be.
Yeah. Yeah, that is absolutely true. And to get to that point where he's created enough of a buzz around him that we go, super fight between Ilya Topuria and Islam Makhachev. This sort of what seemed like when we started this year, we were going, hey, there's only a couple potential big fights out there the UFC can make, and that was one of them. And if now we're sitting around here just because a guy caused a scene at enough wrestling events, got himself kicked off enough commercial flights, became enough of a constantly in the news problem child, that now we're going, actually, put that guy in there. Let's see what that guy could do. That's an amazing feat. And certainly like maybe a model for what you have to do these days when not only is the event schedule so constant, but also the UFC can't really be bothered most of the time to do the promotion of individual fighters unless you got a fight coming up this weekend. Then we might kick it into gear. You got to do the rest of it yourself. And shit, man, to be able to get to that point just by kind of being a dick, you were a dick to enough people in enough different circumstances that we went, all right, shit. Throw that troublesome lout in there and let's see what happens. I mean, I'm not going to say it reflects well on us as a community, that's the way to our hearts, but it is apparently one way to do it.
You can say that he's the model for getting yourself over, going into business for yourself in this industry. But I'm just going to put out a disclaimer as a 48-year-old father of 3. Kids, don't push Uriah Faber off the edge of an elevated wrestling mat just because you're trying to make a name for yourself. It worked for Arman, but it might not work for everybody. Don't try that at home with Uriah Faber. Next question this week comes to us from, they're doing Makhachev though, right? If they get a chance. Yeah, we can sit here and talk all we want to about Arman Tsarukyan being interesting now, but if you get the opportunity and everybody's down, you're definitely doing that one. It's just a question of whether or not the guys want to do it.
Yeah, well, the sticking point, it seemed, from everything we heard about the negotiations for this one, was that they wanted to do Topuria and Makhachev, but they also wanted to do it at a budget price. And that Topuria's camp might have been like, no, not at that price point. And then, maybe Makhachev was hurt anyway and we couldn't do it. So maybe it depends what we're offering if the deal is different for one opponent over another. Because if they turn around and we're just like, all right, Islam Makhachev's in a different weight class, Arman Tsarukyan is the guy, you're the champion, you got to fight the next man up, I could absolutely see that happening.
Next question this week comes to us from Evan Rabelais, who writes in to say, long-time listener, sometimes emailer. He says, I've fallen out on the UFC for reasons that seem to come up every single week in the MMA discourse, including recently when Luke Thomas spoke with Pablo Torre on his podcast. But I'd like to escape reality with a thought experiment. If you had the authority to change the UFC with the express goal of improving the sport, what would you do? I'll go first. Thanks for asking. First is fighter pay. The better pay you provide, the better athletes you attract. Higher base salary and generous bonuses, as well as profit sharing with the athletes at a percentage rate on your position on the card. 2, fewer events, 15 to 18 numbered events per year max, 1 a month and additional for special events, and fight nights once or twice a month, focusing on developing talent and visiting smaller venues in lesser visited cities. Would love to hear any thoughts y'all have. P.S. 10 years ago, I lost my home in a flood, and Chad sent me a replacement copy of Champion of the World when he heard about it. I've never forgotten that small act of kindness, and I really respect the work that you both do. You're a bright spot in an ever-darkening sport. Love you both. Now, you know I'm going to read that one, right?
See, this is how you hack the game right here.
Evan getting himself on the show. I'll tell you what I would do, though. And you just mentioned it a minute ago. First things first. Well, maybe aside from base fighter pay, and this is an offshoot of that, but first things first, pay for the fights, man.
Mm-hmm.
Pay for the fights that we want to see. That was the UFC's business model during the entire arc of its evolution into a mainstream sports force. They said it out loud, patted themselves on the back. We give the people the fights they want to see. Now, not so much. We've had a lot of what otherwise could have been huge fights in this industry get passed over because of monetary concerns, because the UFC is balling on a budget out here. Wouldn't pay John Jones and Francis Ngannou to fight. Might not have been willing to pay Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev to fight. That's the first thing I would change, would be like, if you got the chance to make a big popular fight that everybody wants to see, pay the guys what they're worth to be in it, and you will still make a lot of money, man. UFC is not going to lose money on the fight because they give the guys, 20 million or whatever they're asking for. Pay the guys so I can see the fights. God damn it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the money issue plays out in a couple different ways. One is, pay them so we can make those big fights when there are opportunities, because there aren't even that many opportunities to even do it. So when there are, open up the pocketbook. I also think that we sometimes forget that a big money fight, the big money is part of what drives fan interest in a weird way. It's happened so many times. Like, it's why the PFL managed to ever get us interested by being like $1 million tournament, big check at the end, giant novelty check. Guy's going to hold, it says $1 million on it. Remember how they made us instantly interested in some shit like that? Just because we knew what was at stake. That has worked throughout fight sports history. When John L. Sullivan and Gentleman Jim Corbett fought for the heavyweight title, the whole way they marketed it was they were just like, this is the biggest money fight that there has ever been. The tickets had just like pictures of big money bags on them. Like, even if it's not the fans' money, even if they know they're paying money, they're not getting any money to see it. It ups the excitement for people if they hear like, this guy's going to get $20 million for this fight. Like, that works on people. So that it works in a couple different ways. I also think that when we start from the situation of what would you do to improve the sport, it just reminds you that is not a question the UFC is asking itself. That is so down the list of questions the UFC is asking itself when it's thinking about innovations, things you could change, ways to refine the approach. Like, the first 5 things on their list are ways to make and keep more money, not necessarily ways to make the sport better or even more broadly popular or even sustainably popular. They're not asking that. They're like, how do we get more money in Q4, essentially? And that's kind of as far as they seem to be looking.
Next question this week comes to us from Rust Never Sleeps. Subject line, if you think it's bad now, ... Inspired by the recent back-to-back retirements of fan favorites Gilbert Burns and Cub Swanson, and set against the general backdrop, of things ain't great and don't look to be picking up anytime soon, I took the time to project out where other fan favorite fighters will be in 2 years, and it's not looking good. Each of these fighters will be at least 35 years old 2 years from now, and likely either retired or severely diminished. I focused on current and former champions and generally popular fighters with the kind of name recognition that currently papers over card quality issues today. Now, I will warn you in advance that this is a long list and a sobering list, but I'm going to read it. Cyril Gahn, 38. Curtis Blades, 37. Derek Lewis, 43. Carlos Ulberg, 37. Alex Pereira, 40. Yuri Prohazka, 35. Jan Blachowicz, 47. Khalil Roundtree, 38. Israel Adesanya, 38. Robert Whitaker, 37. Jared Cannonier, 44. Islam Makhachev, 36. Bilal Muhammad, 39. Kamaru Usman, 40. Justin Gaethje, 39. Charles Oliveira, 38. Max Holloway, 36. Beneil Dariush, 38. Michael Chandler, 41. Alexander Volkanovski, 39. Aljamain Sterling, 38. Merab Dvalishvili, 37. Corey Sandhagen, 36. Davison Figueiredo, 40. Alexander Pantoja, 38. Kyoji Horiguchi, 37. Kayla Harrison, 37. Juliana Pena, 38. Raquel Pennington, 39. Valentina Shevchenko, 40. Rose Namajunas, 35. Mackenzie Dern, 35. Zhang Weili, 37. Tatiana Suarez, 37. Like I said, a long list, but that does those. On one hand, it does make it seem like the UFC roster, at least the name recognition in the UFC roster, is getting a little long in the tooth, I guess you could say. On the other hand, don't underestimate the roster here. Like, don't underestimate the UFC's ability to just keep turning over generations of fighters over and over again, especially now that they have the Dana White Contender Series pumping talent at a low price into the UFC. They're still the number one place to fight. We've seen some of these Contender Series guys become capital G guys in the UFC. So this is what happens. The old generation gets old, the new generation steps up. Whether or not the UFC cares to make those people household names, cares to build them into stars, we will see moving into the future. But it does hit me in the heart a little bit to see all of these people that we have become accustomed to and how old they will be.
I don't like seeing all these numbers next to all these names. It's you refer to it as sobering. I feel it is a little depressing.
It makes me feel scared for me. I'm not scared for the UFC.
I'm going to throw out one of those hypotheses, Chad, that I'm not sure I believe. And I need you to kind of sit here and fact check me a little bit.
I'm ready and I would love to.
Is it possible that every new generation of MMA fighters will be able to last or stay close to an athletic prime a little bit longer than the last because training techniques have only gotten smarter? People grind themselves down a lot less than they used to. Could we be moving into an area where, hey, we'll see plenty of 37, 38, 39-year-old fighters who still look pretty damn good just because they didn't do the stupid shit that people were doing back in like 2009?
Peptides.
Okay, there's also that. Where
you're talking about peptides.
We're down there at the Performance Institute giving people peptides, apparently. So maybe that helps too.
I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't necessarily think you're wrong per se, but who's to say? I guess we'll have to wait and find out. We will also have to wait and see if the next generation of fighters is willing to stick around as long as the previous generation of fighters. So I don't know. We'll see. All right. Last question this week from Rami Ahur. Subject line: the UFC have so much money they have decided time zones don't matter. As an Englishman, being an alien living in Sydney, I get to watch the UFC on Sunday mornings, which is really a shock to the body, as when going to a live event, your first soda pop is at 6 a.m., and I am convinced my jokes are funny by lunchtime. However, the mighty Battle Giraffe gets to fight on a Saturday night this weekend. Has the UFC got so much guaranteed income that they now expect the American audience to be slightly inconvenienced by time zones and look after the local market fans? You know what? If this is true for the good people of Perth, I love it for you. Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, the guaranteed income stuff, I think we've been waiting to see the ripple effects of that, especially now that, with pay-per-views gone, you can make it so much goddamn money from Paramount just to do any sort of events at all. It feels to me like at least we haven't seen it as much as I thought we would see it. I don't know what you think. I expected that we would see that effect a little bit more, and maybe it's that the UFC has been slow to do that because of just institutional stubbornness.
Still in the honeymoon period a little bit over there on Paramount, so maybe we got to keep up appearances for a little while before we really let the guaranteed income go to our heads. Now, I don't know. I love it for Perth. I love it for Australia. Go out there on a Saturday night, convince yourself your jokes are funny by 8, 9 p.m., a gentlemanly hour,
Mm-hmm.
a respectable gentlemanly hour to think that you are handsome and everyone in the room loves you. So I'm happy for them.
I'm happy for them too. They've been used to it the other way for so long. I wonder if it's an adjustment period for them, because I went to one of those Sunday morning cards in Australia. I thought it was a good time. It was definitely different. I watched the whole thing, filed my story, and had a nice leisurely lunch afterwards. It was great. I really enjoyed that. Then I turn around, I see this one where Chad, the main card here from Perth kicks off at 2 a.m. in the One True time zone.
Wow. Probably not going to watch this one live, is my guess.
But see, this makes it, how I like to circle back on a Sunday morning with a cup of coffee and catch up on the fight so I don't have to sit through all the filler. This one makes it even easier because I can roll right out of bed, won't even really have a chance to be hit with any spoilers, and can roll right into it.
That's going to do it for the Co-Main Event podcast this week. If you have a question, comment, or concern that you want to air to us in future weeks, you know how to do it. Go to the website, comainevent.com. Click the link in the top right-hand corner of the screen that says email the podcast. That'll get you in touch with us. Watch out for those pledge month announcements. They'll be coming out later this week. You don't want to miss it. If you're on the Patreon, we'll talk to you tomorrow at the live chat. If you're not, we'll see you back here next week. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. The support. As for right now, we are done. We are through. We are out. Okay, here's the thing, though. If you live in Australia and the fight cards go from being in the morning to at night, what are the odds that the Australian MMA audience decides to play that the same way that the Montana Grizzlies football fans decide to play it? When they're like, oh, night game? Cool. We'll just start drinking at the normal time anyway.
Listen, I don't know if you know many Australians.
Did I answer my own question?
I just think that wherever you put the start time of an event, they're going to adjust their drinking accordingly, which is to say a lot. They're going to drink a lot. That you can't get around it. You can't mess with that. They're gonna throw some beers and some shoes out there, and they're gonna have themselves a good time, and everybody else is gonna have to adjust to what that means.